Good day, class. I am Dominique Daniels Clark, and I am back for another video discussion for this week. So Dr. Schultz is going to continue to challenge us to look for sources that correlates with our anticipated dissertation. So for those of you who do not know, my dissertation deals with how Christianity affected African American literacy as well as education historically, and how does religion today still affect Black academia and scholarship. So for this particular, I wanted to address this from a different angle this week. I also wanted to get maybe a source that did not completely correlate or completely prove my thesis to be right, just to provide some type of differentiation. So my first source for today is going to be the Education for Liberation, the American Missionary Association and African Americans, 1890 to the Civil Rights Movement. And this article is pretty much going to give account for the American Missionaries Association, and it's going to advocate that even though the optimism of Reconstruction is going to be shattered due to intimidation and violence, the AMA, they always were steadfast in their belief that Blacks and whites are going to be seen as equal in God's eyes. According to this article, they are going to be some of the biggest advocates for equal rights as citizens for African Americans, and they're going to regard education as the means to full citizenship for African Americans. We know that if you had an education outside of primary school, especially for African Americans, 9 times out of 10 is going to be in a private facility. However, they are going to champion and also create elementary schools, secondary schools, some colleges as well. Okay, and these American Missionary Association schools, or AMA schools, are going to pretty much defy all of the rules of the South. They're going to be interracial facilities, and they're going to advocate for the basic rights of African Americans, not just in terms of education, but just basic rights all around the board. And they're going to train thousands of individuals to become leaders of their environments and teachers of their people. The second source that I decided to use is going to be a little different. It's going to be called Schooling the Free People, Teaching, Learning, and the Struggle for Black Freedom. So historically, we have always been taught that the abolitionist movement or the Freedmen's Bureau is going to be headed up by well-off white middle-class individuals who are very religious. Well, this particular source is going to shatter that notion. So you're going to have an individual who's going to come up with a quantitative study, and he's going to look through the archives of every Freedmen's Aid organization throughout every state in the South. And he is going to collect through the databases 11,600 individuals who were teaching African Americans during the time period of 1861 to 1865. And within this study, he is going to pretty much prove that notion wrong. He's going to shatter that notion that it was not that pretty much religion contributed far less than we actually anticipated to actually do. Okay. So based on his research, he's going to conclude that 1/3 of the teachers were actually African Americans. He's going to say that Black teachers actually taught more, longer and more thoroughly than those white counterparts. He also is going to say half of these teachers are Southerners and not Northerners, like people actually always believe that abolitionists and this is going to be the work of the white Northerners coming to the South. And this source is going to prove that to be false as well. And he's also going to say that the teachers were a little more diverse. So it just wasn't one demographics of individuals who are actually trying to teach these newly freed individuals. So once again, this source is going to kind of demonstrate that evangelicism contributed much less than we actually thought it did in real life. Lastly, is going to be Education for Liberation. And this is going to emphasize, it's actually going to be by Marcella Althus Reed. And this is going to emphasize the teaching of Paulo Freire. Now, when you think about Freire, you think of his pedagogy of the oppressed. So Freire, the author is going to elaborate how Freire developed this Education for Liberation. And in this Education for Liberation, the key is for poor and marginalized individuals should not only learn, but ask questions and seek out the mechanisms in which keeps them oppressed in society. And Freire, this author is also going to emphasize Freire's contribution to Christian education. And she's also going to advocate how Jesus is a God for the living people. And in order for you to know him for yourself, you must know the word for yourself. So in order for you to know the word for yourself, you have to be literate or learned in some type of way. And in closing, this author is also going to begin this particular source kind of relates more to my latter part of my dissertation. How does religion affect academia today? This author is going to continue to challenge the church to understanding Christian education as a whole person, and is going to advocate and say that we can do more than just the Lord's Prayer. We're going to have to put actions behind those words in order to progress for the betterment of God's people, and that is going to be all God's people. So once again, thank you for listening to my video for this week. Again, my dissertation is going to deal with how Christianity affects African American literacy historically, and how does religion affect Black academia today. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you again next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.